welcome back to another episode of the Rebel Love podcast. Today, my guest is Samantha Golba. Samantha is an energetic powerhouse persona and professional coach who believes the purpose of all life is growth. I agree, by the way. She found her passion for personal development one day during a workout when she was somehow convinced herself to do one more push-up than she thought she could do. Definitely been there. She then asked herself the burning question, if I'm holding myself back from doing one more push-up, what else am I holding myself back from in life? From there, Sam took a deep dive into personal development and what drives people to be successful. She found common denominators that she then began to implement in her life and to create her own version of success. Sam now teaches these tools and strategies to women who are looking to step into their power and bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Welcome, Samantha. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Before we get into it, I'm really excited to hear. So today we're going to be talking about the dynamics of a relationship with a 20-year age gap. And this is cool to talk about with you because you are living this, which is awesome. And before we get into your whole, into this topic, I'd love to know a little bit more about your journey, where you are now, and that moment that you kind of pushed yourself that little bit further, because I've definitely been there. So yeah, I'm interested to hear your story.
You mean through my workout that I did?
Yeah. That kind of was like the catalyst, something kind of snaps and then you're like, that's it.
Oh my gosh. I will truly never forget that moment. I was, like you said, I was working out. And at that point in my life, I didn't have the motivation to be working out. I was now that I look back, I was at rock bottom. And I somehow convinced myself to do a workout. And I'll never forget my trainer. I was just doing a simple at-home workout. And my trainer was yelling at me. And he's like, through the screen, he's like, keep going. Don't give up. Keep pushing yourself. And I somehow took his advice and convinced myself to do one more push-up than I thought I could do. And after I did that, I remember it was just like, my mind was just blown. And I can remember just thinking like, oh my goodness, if I'm holding myself back from doing another push-up, what else am I holding myself back from? And that's whenever I really had the awareness around like personal responsibility for your life and realized how much stuff, because at that point I was in a not so good relationship, and I realized that I was in there because of me. Like, it was my responsibility to be happy. And so after I learned that, like, my life just went whoop, like straight up.
Yeah. It's great, isn't it? When you have these realizations and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing this whole time?
Yeah.
Like I've been focusing on all the wrong things or not focusing at all on anything.
And that's exactly it. Whenever I did that, you kind of, at first it's like a gut punch, like, oh my gosh, it really has been me. But then it's really empowering because you realize that if you're holding yourself back, then you're also in charge or in control of taking yourself to where you want to go to.
And I think, that realization can go in a couple of ways where you're like, I don't know, you kind of get down on yourself, or you go, hey, I don't have time to get down on myself. I've wasted too much time already. I'm just going to go for it. And I'm just going to, charge forward.
And I always say, like, now that I've been through that, because that moment that we have of where we're, we kind of get that aha moment, we have multiple of those in life. Like, at every level of growth, like, you're going to experience more levels of like, okay, like, I'm holding myself back here, or I need to fix this, or, you never really just get there. And so what I've realized is that when you do have those moments where, and it could be something in the face of rejection or criticism, or something's not working out for you, I always say, you know what? Give yourself like a 5-minute pity party. Get all of those feelings out and feel sorry for yourself and do everything else, but just don't stay there. And after that time is up, and you could go 5 minutes or an hour, and then you're ready to go. Like, you're not holding those feelings in. Once you experience them, allow them to like go through you, then you're ready. Then you're ready to go. And so just, you can feel that way, just don't stay stuck there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I feel like a lot of people, they avoid even feeling that. And I think that in my experience anyway, there's no way around it. Like, those feelings are either going to be felt now in the moment, or you're going to delay them by, what's the word? Dampening them, or
yes.
Yeah, with like alcohol or drugs or some other vice, TVs, one of them, whatever, exercise. And then you're going to avoid feeling those feelings, and they're going to come out at another time when they've been layered on with other crap as well.
Well, and I think that, like you said, people avoid those feelings because we've been trying to kind of trained to think that failing is not normal and messing up is not normal. And all of these, like, let's just say negative feelings that we experience because we're human, hello. And all of these feelings that we experience, we've been trained to believe that they're not normal, or they mean that we're not good enough, or that we're a failure. And it's actually not that way. If you're not feeling these feelings, then you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And once you kind of feel it, it's all about how you handle it. And so once you learn how to handle it one time, it just prepares you, because it never gets easier. You just get stronger, and you get better at being able to handle them. That's what I've learned.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. Yeah, it doesn't get easier. You just get better at dealing with it.
Right, for sure.
Yeah. And that rebound time, I'm forever in, chasing that, to shorten that rebound time between something happening and me being okay about it, me bouncing back from it.
And that's exactly it. And I mean, I could say that lesson right there that you just talked about is probably what my whole talk we're going to have about today, like, revolves around, is that situations are always going to happen to you. You just learn how to handle them better, and how you handle them in a way where it's going to help you propel forward.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, I feel like we're already like charging into it. Okay, cool. So I know that we're going to talk about your juicy relationship. This is definitely what we want to talk about. So before we get into the dynamics of your relationship, can you tell us a little bit about how you met your current partner and your situation?
Yeah, so my boyfriend, he is 21 years older than me, and he has 2 kids from a previous marriage, and we actually met at work. And I was admittedly dating somebody at the time, and it wasn't a great relationship to begin with, but I was dating somebody, and so I never had an interest in him because my mind wasn't there. And my boyfriend that I had at the time, we actually ended up breaking up. And so my now boyfriend, Josh, he asked me out, and immediately I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what? I didn't know how old he was. I didn't think he was as old as he was, but I'm like, what's this guy want from me? Like from this young girl. And my manager was actually the one that kind of like pushed me, and she's like, he's a great guy. He's looking for somebody like you. And I was like, all right, maybe I'll give him a chance. And so I ended up doing it.
Wow, it's worked out.
It has worked out. Yeah, it definitely has worked out.
How long have you guys been together?
3 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I know that there's a lot of questions for me. Actually, I have a friend who is in a relationship with someone who's 25 years older than he is. And there's just a lot of logistical things that I'm interested in finding out about.
Oh, yeah.
So for example, I know like I've just got so many questions. I don't even know which one to put first. Let's start with the dynamic between you and his ex, because there is going to be something there, because that's the mother of his children, I assume.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And that's one thing that everybody wants to know about, but everybody's afraid to ask. And so I'm glad that you're bringing it up, because it's something that if you're in this kind of relationship, like, you do struggle with this. And I will say that I am a lot better now than I was whenever I started. But like you said, it's how you handle everything. You get better at handling stuff. His ex and I actually have a great relationship, which I'm very, very thankful for. That's taken work. And so, nothing in this relationship, like any dynamic that we're going to discuss, has just happened the way that it happened. It happened with intention and work, and it's always work and it's always progress. But in a normal relationship, the extent of the ex that you deal with is like, you stalk them on Instagram, you like make sure that your friends are like backing you up, like, oh no, like, you're better than her, don't worry about it, like, she has nothing on you. And then she eventually kind of like, hopefully, like, fades away. Like, that's the extent of an ex in a relationship. But for me, and for this dynamic, the ex is a part of your life. Like, you have to figure out, like, even if she's not, even if you guys don't do stuff together, you still have her children walking through your door a majority of the time. And so I will say that a lot of the struggles that, women deal with in this aspect are internal. And so where for me, I haven't had a lot of drama in the external, meaning like in a situation where like me and the ex don't get along. But as a woman, I compare myself to her a lot because I always think like, and this is stuff that I never even knew I would be thinking about until I got into this kind of relationship. But there's so many times that I thought about like, oh my goodness, I will never be the first woman that my boyfriend proposes to, or that he sees walk down the aisle, or I will never give him his first baby. And so all of these things that me in my 20s, I'm so excited to experience for the first time, he's experienced all of them before. And so it's so easy for me to get into this trap of thinking it doesn't mean as much to him. Will he like my kids as much as he likes her kids? And so, there's just so many different emotions that we have to deal with. And whether, she gives you trouble or she doesn't give you trouble, my biggest thing that's helped me work through these things is that no matter how amazing and great she is, it doesn't take away from how amazing and great you are. And just because she's a significant person that's in, their life doesn't make you any less significant. And being the second wife doesn't mean that you're the second choice or you're the second rate. And so it takes listen, I say all this confidently now because I've had to put in so much work to get here. I've had so many nights like where I'm like deep in a bottle of wine, like, thinking about old memories because, and you have to provide a place for the kids to feel safe to talk about their mom. Like that's their mom. And I can't imagine my parents being divorced and my dad's girlfriend being, taking away from me and my mom. Do you know what I mean? And so I've always tried to like make it a place where they feel safe enough to bring up their mom and talk about her and comfortable with that because they already went through a divorce. They shouldn't have to feel like I can't talk about my mom because like my stepmom doesn't want to hear it or anything. So
totally. Well, I think that's just maturity, which is, really nice because the thing is as well, I haven't been through a divorce. Well, actually my parents did get divorced, but I was too young to remember it. But I worked with somebody who went through a divorce. And I was very involved in that. And it was incredibly traumatic for me as an adult. So I couldn't imagine how, heavy it is for children to deal with. So the fact that you're aware of, not making anything harder for them is, really admirable. And I think that, like you said, you've done a lot of work to get there. What do you think was the most kind of useful thing for you to, one, realize that you had to do the work? And then how did you tackle actually doing the work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Whenever I realized that I needed to do the work was that I didn't realize how many, I don't want to say issues, but ups and downs there was going to be like emotionally and just situationally in this relationship. And I just, the friend support that I had then, even though they're great, they weren't equipped to handle this emotional roller coaster. And so I've had my lowest of lows, just in the matter of the comparison or just, having to like be in the same room as the ex and you don't know how to act in a lot of ways. And so I actually started to go to therapy and because I just didn't know how to handle these emotions. I mean, you honestly experience emotions that you never even knew that you could experience. And you just have questions. And one of the hardest things is that whenever I would ask for help from my friends or whoever it was, rightfully so, like they don't know how to, if you're not in this relationship, you don't understand it. And so it's hard for you to give advice on it. And so everybody would always just say like, it's because of the age gap. It's because of the age gap. It's because of the age gap. And I'm like, that's not helping me. And so I went to therapy and I would like express these feelings that I had. And she's like, Sam, those are all completely normal feelings to have. And I'm like, really? And so once I knew that how I was feeling wasn't wrong, then I was able to take it and actually like breathe through it. And so every time a feeling would come up, I would remind myself, like, Sam, this doesn't mean that you don't matter. This doesn't make you less significant. This doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to get what you want. And so it's all about, like, how we've been talking about this, so far, is that the situations are still going to happen. Like, they still happen to this day. They just don't affect me the way that they did. And so whenever they come up, I have this, like, I'm like my own coach. Like, in my head, I'm like, all right, Sam, like, pull it together. And I have this thing where I know the trigger and how it makes me feel. So if it makes me feel less significant, or that I don't matter, or that I'm an outsider, I have like this conversation that I have with myself to remind me that I am here and I do matter and I have a voice in this house. And so that's what helped me.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. Interesting that you noticed that you were making yourself wrong, and that's what was really getting in the way. Like, you somehow in there, some conditioning had you believe that what you were feeling was wrong. That's really, really interesting observation there. I love that.
Yeah. And, I think that part of it is like, when you're in the role of taking care, or just being the woman in somebody else's family, let's just say, is how it feels whenever you start out, is that, if a mom were to say, my kids are driving me insane today, like, I just need to walk outside for a second, like, that's acceptable. But for a stepmom or someone who's with somebody that has kids, if they say, oh my gosh, like, my stepkids are driving me crazy today, I just got to go outside for a second, it just sounds worse. It just sounds like the mom can need a break, but the stepmom can't. And so in a lot of ways, like, we feel wrong for feeling the ways that we're feeling, whenever it's actually completely normal. Like, we need a break from our friends sometimes, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, let's say, it's also, I always kind of describe like love as like a bubble. You've got like this agreement with someone, you've got a little bubble, and particularly parents and children, they have I remember this from my childhood. When my mother got a partner, I was like, hey, I don't want to share her. So anyone who came in, I was like giving them a hard time, because I was like, well, you're taking away my time, basically. Right. And so that's, from the perspective of the child. And I do remember this quite vividly. And then as my mom's partner, I got to know her, then it was like, it became a lot easier to let her in and, share. But for a while, before I knew who she was, I was like, well, this is not really going to work for me, because I don't want to share it.
Right, of course.
So then, when you build that relationship with those kids, then the bond, you have your own bond, and that becomes really sacred, your own bubble. Yeah, nice. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to mention as well was, there's a lot of comparison going on, like you said at first, with the ex. And I don't know, I always have this thing that I'm like, well, they're ex for a reason. If they weren't, you wouldn't even be with him, because she'd be with him. So that, you're in these positions as a reason. And I think as women, I can only speak for myself, but I have noticed it a lot with other women. We tend to compare ourselves a lot to other women.
Oh gosh, yeah, for sure.
So it's that thing as well of like, oh, she's this and I'm not, or she's this and I'm not. And it's like, well, hang on a second, that's you as, I don't know. It's just, it sounds like insecurities, and everyone has them is the point I'm trying to make, is that everyone has them anyway.
Yeah, they really do. And it's hard not to. And I think that, you're going to compare yourself to, I've always thought, like, comparison isn't bad. It's not bad unless you you allow it to make you feel like you're less than. And I think that, one of the biggest thing is that this has helped me do, and not just with me and the ex, but with me and any other woman. Just because another woman is great, or even if she's not, doesn't mean that you're not great. And just because she's great in her area, or however she is great, doesn't mean that you have to be great like her. You can be completely different. Like you mentioned, like, obviously if they were, if they're different, they would be, they're divorced for a reason or whatever.
Yeah.
She's great in her own way. and we're very different, but there's room for both of us to be the best version of ourselves and different.
I love that. Yes, exactly. Somebody else's success doesn't take away, detract from your success.
Exactly. And just because they're successful doesn't mean you have to like be who they're being. Or just because they're different doesn't make you better. And so it's like, how are we, like, what are the benefits of our differences, and how can we make those work together?
Yeah, what qualities am I bringing to the table, and standing firm in them? That's the thing. We always tend to think, well, I mean, often we hear that people are like, oh, they're better at me than this, but it's just, well, it's maybe not better, it's different. It's like love. You can't really compare two romantic loves because they're always so different.
And that's the truth. And I always like to say, like, think about Nike and Under Armour. They're the same, they're competitors. They're just, and some people like this one better, and some people like this one better. And they're both great in what they are, but they're just different.
Yeah. And people have preferences.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I have some questions now, some like more logistical questions. I heard you mention before that like maybe kids are on the card with your partner. Has that conversation come out, and like how did that surface, and what's that journey been like?
Yeah, so I mean, and everybody's different, but I knew that I wanted kids. I wanted marriage, I wanted kids, I wanted a family. Like, I always knew that. And so whenever I first met my boyfriend, I told him, I told my mom this, and she's like, you really said that on the first night? But on the first time we were even together, I was like, listen, like, here's the deal. I want to get married and I want to have kids. I was 23 years old. And so I was like, I am getting ready to step into that whole phase of my life. And this guy that I just met is now 45 years old, and he's already been there. And so I'm like, I'm not going to get involved with him and his kids if he doesn't want the same things that I want. Because I was not going to be a woman that was like in their life and then not in their life, and then just jumping at like back and forth. I was either in or I was out. And so I said, hey, look, I want to get married and I want to have kids. And it was really funny because he was actually like, as soon as I said have kids, he's like, I definitely want more kids. And he's like, but marriage, eh. And I mean, at first I'm like, hello, like I'm a young girl, like I want to get married. And so now, that conversation has definitely shifted, and he's definitely more about it. Hopefully that happens soon. But that was one thing that I always tell women that, approach me about this, is that they meet a guy that's older and he already has kids, and suddenly they don't want kids anymore. Or maybe it's if they don't want them anymore, they're not sure if they want to have kids because he already has them. And I always say if you're going to date an older guy, don't give up what you want just because he already has had it. Because you think that now, but then if you wait 5 years down the road and you're like, wow, I really want my own kids, and if he's older, or if he just, 5 years down the road and you guys have already decided that you don't want kids, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I do want kids now, you can build up a lot of resentment for him not wanting what you want. And so it's such a tricky thing, because I think it's important to verbalize what you want in the beginning, but if they're not on board right away, that's pretty normal. Like, no guy that you meet and you say up front on your first date, I want kids, I want to get married, they're like, whoa, Sally, slow down. You know what I mean? But I just think it's important in that situation to really verbalize like what your wants and needs are, and making sure that you're at least on the same chapter of a book to move forward.
Yeah, I think you do that in any relationship with a smaller age gap as well. Just maybe perhaps you wouldn't have that conversation quite so early. But I think, it's great that you addressed it really early, because it's like there's no point in me getting tied up in this emotionally if it's not moving in the direction that is going to work for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't want to, if you're dating around the kids, like if you're, going out whenever he doesn't have them, then that's fine to have that conversation down the road. But we jumped in really quick, and so I just wasn't going to be like coming over for 6 months to a year and then being like, hey Josh, I want kids, and he's like, I'm sorry, I don't. And then the kids are like, you're leaving because you want like your kids don't get that they're not my kids, and so they're it's just I don't want to be the one to be jumping in and jumping out whenever they've already gone through the loss of a parent.
Yeah, I love that you're conscious of that too. Yeah, because it is really sad. I dated someone with kids, and it was really sad leaving his kids because
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, his daughter reached out to me actually a couple of years after. It was really sweet and she said something really sweet. She was like, because I was like, oh, I'm surprised you remember me. And she's like, oh, I remember you. You were really significant. And I was like, oh my God, that's so sweet.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really nice. I had a really good bond with her. So yeah. Okay. So there's a few other questions I have. What was the reaction from both from his friends and family and from your friends and family when you started dating? Because we live in a pretty judgy society, don't we?
Oh my gosh, yeah, for sure. When we started to date, I first told my mom Mom, I met a guy, and she was like, oh, you did? And I'm like, yeah, and he's almost your age. And she was kind of like, Samantha, and then my dad's like, so let me get this straight. You're closer in age to his kids than you are to him. And I'm like, oh, never thought about it that way. But I will tell you, I've had great support so far from my family. A lot of people, the biggest concern that I've had on my end of my family and my friends was that I was going to still have the life that I wanted to have. Meaning that I wasn't giving up like having my own kids or getting married, and that I wasn't giving up my 20s and to be with him. They were just very conscious of like, make sure that this is like, you're still going to stand true and like what you want, and just don't give it up. And then on his end, everybody has been very, very respectful and receptive of me. I think that his friends, like his guy friends, half of them are divorced too, and so half of the new wives that they have and new girlfriends that they have, like we're both like meet each other for the first time. But I've only had a few people that were friends with his ex that have like commented to stuff on me. But I think that the biggest group of I don't have anybody give me pushback from this, but the biggest group of people that I do are like the kids' friends' moms who know the ex and don't know that her and I are cool. I get so many cold shoulders from them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's probably the craziest thing, but it's not that big of a deal.
That's so interesting as well, because I don't know how their life how that affects them.
It doesn't.
It's really, yeah, that's kind of.
It's really funky.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so how did you forge, or how did you begin to forge once you realized that, okay, I really like this guy, this is going, there's a lot of potential here. How did you kind of forge a relationship with the kids, and how quickly did that start after you started dating?
So I will tell you that when people ask me like, when's the right time to tell the kids and move in, there's not a right time. Like there is generally not a right time, and I just think that there's more of a not a right time, but more of a right way to do it. I mean, I say that because I knew the kids because they would come to work with their dad, and so I didn't know them well. I mean, I only worked there for 3 months before we actually started dating, but I saw them a few times. They just knew me as the girl at the bank that we worked at, and my boyfriend ended up coming to work, taking me to lunch with them, and then he kind of made it like their idea or their choice to like bring me home or to be with me. And so he would bring me around them, and eventually like he would be like, what do you guys think? Like, do you like her? And this all happened within a few weeks. And so they were just like, yeah, we really like her and everything. And then I was staying at his house until like 3 o'clock in the morning because I didn't want to invade on the kids and, have them like, here I am, like jumping into their house. And so his son, who was like 5 at the time, like looked at me one night and he was like, why don't you just stay here? And so that's whenever Josh was like, oh, like you wanted to stay? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, like I'll stay then. And that's kind of how we moved everything in. But it's kind of giving them the choice, without really giving them the choice. Obviously, like, you're going to present it to them in that way, but making them feel like they have a say in it, is what I think that he did a really great job about. So he was really good about that. But then whenever I got into the picture, I was very conscious of making the kids know, especially his daughter at the time, who was like 10 years old. I was like, I am not here to replace your mom, to be your mom, or to take you away from your mom. I'll be whoever you want me to be, but I'm not here to be her. And I repeated that over and over and over again. And to the point where, like, I was, always bringing up, how's your mom doing? Like, what's your mom up to? And just always breaking the ice, and like bringing the mom up, and like letting them know that I'm not here to replace her. And anytime that the mom was brought up, I was always championing, that's a hard word to say right now, championing her. And just, I was like supportive of, unless they're coming home saying like, mom's, beating me over the head with a pan, that's a different story. But like, when they would come over at our house, like, we're not going to bad talk their mom.
Yeah.
And so even if like their dad is doing it, because they're divorced and everything, I think that what I did well in the beginning with is just always being like, I had their mom's back. Even before we had a good relationship, I had their mom's back. And I think that made them feel safe with me, where they didn't have to choose which woman in their life they liked better. And so that's what I feel like really allowed me to step in and be present here the way that I am.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really important distinction to make. That's interesting. My mother did that too with my father. She never, even though he definitely would never get the Father of the Year award, she never bad talked him ever, even when we did. And it was very, very mature, and it helped a lot. It was a really great modeling behavior. So I think that's, excellent advice for anyone listening as well. Sometimes
Right.
I feel like I've noticed that this is quite a difficult task for some people, to not bad talk the other parent. And I feel like if you find yourself in that position, then going to counseling and doing what you did and doing that work on yourself is really useful, because we're the adults in this situation, right?
And that's exactly it. And I think that it's important to note that just because I support the mom and I like have her back and all of these different things, doesn't mean that I don't disagree with her at certain times. Everything's so different. And I just think that it's really important that if you have those feelings and these issues, you don't bring them to the kids. Like, it's not the kids' responsibility to deal with that and those challenges that you have. And so I've always thought, like, if I have any harsh feelings or anything that I feel, like, that's on me to deal with. I don't have to take those insecurities, that pain that I have, those questions that I have, and like make them feel a certain way about her so that they can come back and like me more. No, I just feel like that's where you have to do the work on yourself and be able to celebrate another woman who happens to be like your significant other's ex, which is really, really, really hard to do, but it actually has benefited me in more ways than just one. So
I think that's excellent advice. Like, yeah, I think that's really, really, again, super important to state. It's not the children's responsibility,
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I love that. Okay, so sorry, go ahead.
To add there, because I think it's important, is that kids are not dumb, and so they're going to make their own opinions. Like, they're going to compare both households. Like, that's a fact. Like, no matter what you do, they're going to compare. And so if you're supporting, what I've found is that when you're offering a supportive, environment to both households, like, they don't have to like choose, they don't have to be defensive over one house. And so they feel more comfortable with like sharing struggles or sharing things that are going on, because they don't feel like they have to defend the other person to you because you always talk negatively about them.
And actually, what was interesting for me was that I started opening up to my mum's partner differently and sharing more, because I knew my mum would react in a certain way.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas she didn't have that kind of parent power. So there wasn't that, and it was great because it was kind of like another way to get to my mom.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so true.
So kids figure it out. They know how to get what they want and play play the parents and the step parents.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so what else has been kind of a big struggle with you, or that you've kind of overcome, or just even just a challenge? Because I know that, you know, we've really tackled the big things, which is like the kids, and, you know, I think actually mainly that's the main one. And I guess like stages in your life, how do you go with that? Because if he's 21 years older than you, and how old are you now?
I'm 26 right now.
26. So then he's in a very different stage of his life. So he's thinking about kind of retirement in the next 10 years.
Right. No, yeah, he's definitely thinking about that. Yeah, I will tell you that I've never felt like we were in different phases or stages of our lives before. And I think that that's why I like him. It's because I don't necessarily feel like I'm dating an older man. You know what I mean? Like I never feel like he's very young at heart. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of like the best of both worlds. He has like the maturity of somebody who's a lot older, but he's, you know, definitely younger at heart. And so I think that that's important to note, because the qualities that the stuff that I like about him, I could also find that in someone that's younger too. And so I don't want people to like take the idea that the key to having a great relationship like I do is to go and find an older guy to date, because there's older guys that are not the right guys to date also, but then there's also younger guys. Like just because I would go and date a younger guy doesn't mean that I'm going to go and have this great relationship with him. And so I think that it's really important to find and to understand what you want in your significant other. Like how do you want them to act in this situation? Like what kind of father do you want them to be? What do they do, you know, professionally? Like how do they carry themselves, and understanding how they show up in their life, and then going out and finding that person, whether he's like 20 years older or 2 years older, because it's not what people in age gap relationships realize is that once you're in them, the age difference fades. Like the stuff that's the age, it just doesn't matter after a long time. After you get used to it, it's like, you know, the excitement and the thrill of it kind of goes away, and you're left with the person that you're with. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, you just have to like the person that you're with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not like you picked him because he's 20 years older. He just happened to be 20 years older.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and then you're like, okay, how are we going to navigate this? Because I really like you.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're a keeper.
Right.
Perfect. Okay, so before we wrap up, I've just got like one question for somebody else who finds they might find themselves in the same situation as you. What's kind of your biggest takeaway that you could share with them, or best piece of advice of dealing with this? Because there's a lot of layers to your relationship that I guess people with smaller age gaps might not have to consider.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great question. You nailed it whenever you just said there's a lot of layers. And so my biggest advice that I would give, and that's helped me be where I'm at right now, is find support with people who understand what you're going through. Because just watch who you're venting to. Because if you vent to the wrong person, they're going to fill your mind with like, you can find somebody younger, or you don't have to deal with all of this extra stuff. Like you're so young and you can get any guy that you want. And then you're going to start thinking about that. And then you're going to be torn because you're like, well, I really like him, but then they're kind of right. And so my biggest piece of advice is to expect that this type of relationship is going to have ups and downs like you can't imagine. Like you're going to have to deal with so much more than you would in a normal relationship. But at the end of the day, you have to really, really, really like your significant other. Because if you don't, if your relationship between you and him is rocky, nothing else is going to be worth it. Like you have to wake up every day and think to yourself, I am choosing him because I love him, and I'm choosing everything that comes with it. Because like I said, it's a roller coaster now, but it's also a roller coaster in any other relationship that you'll have. Like if you go out and find a normal relationship, it might not be the same roller coaster, but it's still going to be a roller coaster. And so you're always going to have challenges no matter where you are, no matter what relationship you're in, no matter if he's 20 years older, 2 years older, has kids, doesn't have kids. Relationships come with their challenges. And so find the support that you need from people who deal with the challenges that you deal with, and then allow yourself to grow from there.
Nice. Thank you. That's great advice. And if people want to get in touch with you and perhaps get that support from you, how can they get in touch with you?
You can find me on Instagram at slaywithsam, or my website at slaywithsam.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for being here. It has been a pleasure. I feel like there is a lot of questions that people will have for you as well. So I'm sure there'll be some outreach there. Yeah. And you can find all of the links mentioned in this episode and all the show notes at rebellove.com/EP18. That is rebellove.com/EP18. Thank you so much again, Sam, for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thanks for listening to the Rebel Love podcast, the podcast about love, sex, relationships, and money. If you like this episode, please support us by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. And find all the details of this episode and more at rebellove.com/podcast.